So, everyone says Europe is losing the AI race because of regulation. But what if regulation is not the real problem? In this episode, we have Benifei Brando, a member of European Parliament and one of the architects of the EU AI Act. He is also the chair of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with the United States. So he's right in the middle of the digital transition, AI, and the new globalization, Trump's tariff wars. And he explains why Europe's real bottlenecks are finance, fragmentation, enforcement, and access to data. So if you work on research, innovation, or funding decisions, this episode may change how you read the next call. Okay, so we are tackling one of the most persistent narratives in Europe right now. The idea that Europe is falling behind in AI because it regulates too much. You hear this from investors, you hear this from tech platforms, everyone. But my guest today makes a different argument. According to him, Europe's competitiveness problem existed long before the AI Act. It existed long before the GDPR, and it has very little to do with regulation itself. Instead, the real constraints are structural: fragmented financial markets, limited access to risk capital, weak enforcement coordination across member states, and insufficient access to high-quality data to train AI systems. So this matters enormously if you are designing research proposals, if you are managing research institutions, building innovation consortia, or allocating capital under digital transition. Because if you might misdiagnose the problem, you optimize for the wrong problem, of course. In this conversation, my guest speaks not as a commentator, but as someone who negotiated the AI Act line by line and now monitors its implementation, while also leading the EU-US parliamentary relations. So we will use this interview to understand what Europe is actually regulating, what is not regulating, and where the real competitive pressure points are. So before we make elaborate explanations about what Europe is getting wrong on AI competitiveness, let's hear from someone who actually wrote the rules. This episode of InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles, is brought to you by my new book, Transition Science in the Economy. In it, I use data from more than 180 countries and 150,000 observations, data points, to show how 5 global shifts, 5 global transitions, the digital, the green, the new globalization, the transition to a war economy, and the housing crisis transition, how these 5 transitions are collapsing the middle class and rewriting prosperity and power. So if you want a clear map of today's economy and economic chaos, search for Transition Science in the Economy on Amazon and get your copy. So welcome back to InnovEU. Today I'm very pleased to welcome Brando Benifei to InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles. Welcome to the podcast, Brando.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
In case someone in the audience may not know you, I'll run just a brief introduction in which I selected what's of the many activities you do. I selected what seems more relevant for this podcast. So Brando Benifei is an Italian politician, long-serving member of the European Parliament since 2014, representing the Partito Democratico within the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. So he has been deeply involved in shaping Europe's digital transition, including serving as co-rapporteur of the Artificial Intelligence Act, one of the most significant pieces of regulation on AI worldwide. Probably the first, I think it's the first. But Benifei also currently serves as chair of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with the United States of America. So reflecting his key role in Europe's evolving global position and cooperation with strategic partners like the US. So this gives us the opportunity to explore 2
core transitions, very important for Europe's strategic future: the digital transition, mostly AI governance, and the transition to a new globalization with a special focus on EU-US relations in research, innovation, technology governance, and well, everything. So, Brando, thank you very much for being here. Let me start by asking you this. You've been deeply involved in these two transitions. As co-rapporteur of the AI Act, you think it should help shape Europe's first comprehensive legal framework for artificial intelligence, but with what purpose? With the purpose of helping balance innovation with safety and fundamental rights, with the purpose of further developing faster the new technologies. What do you think is, let me put it in a simpler way, what do you think is the real purpose, the real utility of this AI Act?
Yeah. Well, my opinion is that the main purpose of the AI Act, of which I've been the rapporteur of the European Parliament together with another colleague, and so I've been negotiating with the member states the final text of the law, is to guarantee protections where risks exist, and at the same time provide for a trust on the possibility to adopt AI systems in Europe in a safe way, so that people can be confident that we can use more AI in our life, because in Europe, the rules that we have decided will allow AI to be human-centric, to be respectful of human rights, to prevent risks for health and safety.
Okay. Just recently, I think this week or last week, South Korea introduced their own AI Act. I don't remember the name, but they have their own regulation for the first time. I'm not very familiar with it yet. I don't know if you are, and if you can tell us how it compares with the AI Act.
Well, I can tell you that I'm still studying the case you mentioned, but I know it, and it's not the only case. There are others happening around the world at the moment, also in some states of the United States, which is a bit paradoxical, because it's the federal government of the US that is more clearly opposing this approach, but some of the states are going in the opposite direction. But also Canada, Japan, they are working around proposals. And I can bring you this example. Exactly next week, I will meet with Brazilian parliamentarians to discuss what is happening in the Brazilian parliament on a similar idea of an AI Act. But I have spoken, for example, recently also in the Pan-African Parliament about this topic. And some months ago also with Saudi Arabia representatives. So from areas that are very different, also democratic and non-democratic states, we see there are moves towards the need to regulate AI. Obviously, it's important that, especially starting with the democracies, there is a cooperation at global level to find some common understanding on what we want to regulate in AI. There are domestic matters regarding internal market functioning for deployment of AI, which is what the AI Act does. But also, and the AI Act does also that, there is another aspect that is the broader AI safety issues. So how we deal with the existential risks of AI, the risks of militarization of AI, the use for repressing freedoms, or creating escalation of a military kind. So we have issues that need international cooperation to be tackled.
I see. In fact, AI systems intersect with all societal changes, from labor markets to public goods. Now, put yourself in the shoes of EU research team that is working on proposals. You know that impact is everything. Your proposal must prove that will have a big impact. And then in the end of the form, there is this little box. You have to write something about ethics. The disproportionate of the two things in any EU proposal is big. But, okay, you are designing your project and you want it to align with the regulatory expectations and the real societal needs. There is no consensus about this, is there? We can hear people say that, well, child pornography should not be abolished because that's censorship. I'm talking about Elon Musk, of course.
Yes.
We can hear other people say that suppressing or putting limits to AI only favors authoritarian regimes.
I know very well this debate. In fact, in my present capacity, I'm not only the chair of the monitoring group of the implementation of the AI Act, but I'm also the chair of the delegation for relations with the US of this European Parliament. So I've been many times to the US in the last months. I will be soon again there. And I face a lot of attacks from certain areas of the public discourse in the US regarding the risk of censorship through AI Act and Digital Services Act. But instead, I think that we need to be clear that with the AI Act, we simply want the models that are behind the generative AI systems to be checked in front of existing risks for our democratic freedoms and of public goods like the rights of children that we do not want to be incited to commit suicide. We do not want them to be at the center of the nudification acts through generative AI. So, in fact, I think that we are not censoring anything. We just want to prevent a misuse of the creation ability of AI or of the activity of chatbots, because we do not adhere to a form of extreme idea of the freedom of speech. Rather, we think everything needs to be balanced with other necessities, other rights. And I think that protecting children from abuses, it's something that is absolutely worth it. And I can tell you that in the European Parliament, but I think that also in most European governments, there is a majority to go in this direction and do not follow the US approach that anyway appears very fragmented, because as I said earlier, many member states of the United States of America, they are providing for different solutions on this matter.
So, in that role of your being the chair of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with the United States, how do you see transatlantic cooperation going on in the near future, and how do you think this will influence research ecosystems, innovation policy, regulatory alignment? What should researchers do about their cooperation with the US partners?
Well, I think that it's very important to try to keep the transatlantic context and the US researcher context involved and engaged with us, because many of them are asking for that. They feel the risk of being singled out because of what the government is doing, and they are often in a difficult situation today because of what is happening. And I think that it's very important that we do. On one end, we build more autonomy and sovereignty of European research. At the same time, we keep cooperations where possible, where needed, where it's feasible, cooperating with the many that do not like this aggressive stance towards Europe that we see from different instances in the US, starting from the US administration. But US is a complex context with different actors and different people. And so I think that we should not lose the tentative to engage that is especially important.
One of the things I hear more often from my colleagues, researchers, and from the audience is this idea that these new technologies that we are trying to push forward to develop, they often have cross-border impacts, and they just don't know borders. This puts you in a difficult situation when you have so many different or such different stances in different countries. How can European frameworks like the AI Act coordinate with the international counterparts in order to support research to be both compliant and globally competitive?
Well, it's very important that we support the compliance, that we accompany this work, that we involve the scientific community to communicate to the developers, to the businesses, so that many things can be clarified, because very often I hear issues raised around the AI Act implementation that actually don't have anything to do with the AI Act, and are often issues linked to interpretations of the GDPR or issues related to national limitations. So it's very important that the Commission and the scientific community strengthen the dialogue with the developers to have clarity on what is required, because, to be frank, the AI Act excludes a lot of AI applications from any obligations and identifies instead certain use cases where we need to verify quality and appropriateness of data used to train the system, cybersecurity level, human control, or even chooses to prohibit certain use cases because they are too problematic and dangerous. For example, the abuse of biometric cameras without a judicial authorization, or the emotion recognition in workplaces and in study places. So we are having a system that is quite clear, and I think that it's true that there are sometimes uncertainties in the ways the legislation interact with one another. This is what the Commission is also dealing with guidelines, with some of the proposals of the simplification omnibuses, but we must not abandon the idea of regulating what needs to be regulated, and where Europe can actually lead the way at a global level. I don't think that if we abandon our leadership in bringing a framework of rules that can also be looked into by other parts of the world, we can gain any real competitive advantage. In fact, I think that the problem with Europe is what is lacking today, like integration of the financial markets, clarity on more centralized enforcement, so that it's not that a European law ends up being implemented by single member states in a confused way. We still have these cases. So I think that we should look at where the real problems are and where we can build more clarity and streamline all that deals with regulation of innovation.
Oh, I've heard that you probably heard people say that with this AI Act, with all this regulation, Europe is giving the United States the lead in this race for AI. But on the other hand, we've seen this before. It's a trend that has happened in the past decades. European researchers in the research phases have many success stories. Europe creates great science, great innovations, great startups, with EU support, but then the unicorns are American. Then these successful European startups, if they want to scale, they need to go to the States. And this has nothing to do with the AI.
Yeah, it was. That's exactly the point. This situation was there before. Even the GDPR, that is another object of attention, and for sure it was there before the AI Act. So I think the issues are different. We need to have a more unified approach at European level. We need to abandon fragmentation. We need more ability to finance innovation with more openness to risk. This is something that I think needs to change a bit in a culture of European investors. And I think that this is something where we can do better. Obviously, we can simplify, we can streamline also legislation, but if we focus only on that, we will not be able to overcome our competitive disadvantages. I'm extremely convinced of this. Also, in the case of AI Act, there is often this misconception that the rules will apply to the EU companies. This is totally wrong. The EU AI Act rules apply to any company that wants to sell a product of AI that has been developed by that same company. And only in the cases that are considered of a certain level of risk. Otherwise, the AI Act simply doesn't apply. It's where we see a low risk of AI deployment. So, in fact, the AI Act applies to all businesses. So at the moment, as they are more from US or China, more to those businesses than to the European ones. And the issue that I see some disadvantage, to be frank, is the level of access to quality data sets in Europe to train AI. And that's something we need to deal with. And also, as I said earlier, the access to finance. But these are all issues that have nothing to do with the AI Act.
There is still another view that I've heard before, and I'd like your opinion on it. I've heard before people say, well, actually, maybe you shouldn't change anything, because that means that when these huge companies are created, they go to the United States, they create those billionaires, those Elon Musks and others like him, and I'm not sure we want them in Europe. Maybe we are better off with the companies that use the platforms instead of having the owners of the platforms in Europe. What do you say?
I am a bit doubtful of this reasoning, because I think that Europe, in this new world full of problems that we are facing, needs to be more autonomous on the digital sphere. And this means we need to build stronger companies, a stronger public commitment, but also private investment, private development with innovative companies that can provide more sovereignty for Europe in the digital area. I've seen the Digital Sovereignty Summit in Berlin with France and Germany quite at the lead, but that's still a very limited approach, to be frank. I think we need to accelerate, do more, and this means that we need to build a more, a stronger ecosystem of AI in Europe. We cannot just accept what we are now, because we are full of dependencies that we need to overcome.
Okay, so just to finish the interview, let me ask you about this, because we've been talking both about digital transition and transition to this new globalization. If you could give one concrete advice to researchers, innovators, project leaders across Europe to take in the next 12 months to position themselves strategically, what would that be? I don't know if you have a thought about that. What advice would you give them?
Well, I think it's important to be very attentive in the European context on what will happen in the next year related to the research area when we look at the European new multi-annual budget, because we need to be sure that we do not change the level of access by researchers to funding, to support by the European Union. I think there will be the tentative to actually give more space only to big players, both public and private, while I think we need to maintain the ability to create consolidation, bigger projects, yes, but also to support a widespread base research that is still a point of strength of the European Union.
So you're saying we should be looking attentively to this new framework.
You need to make the voice of research and of project making in the scientific and research innovation area with the European Commission, with the European governments, because we are in a time where there are a lot of pressures to change things in many ways, and also the resources are not all that should be there, that are needed. So I think it will be important to raise the voice and be ready, and also obviously work more together, more cooperation between different European research institutions and companies, because we need to do more together as Europeans. We need to think at the European level.
Are you optimistic for Europe's future?
At the moment, not very much, because I think that our political leaders are not up to the task, to be very frank and open. But I think that the situation might make the willingness that is still lacking. So I am maybe optimistic, no, but cautiously convinced that the changing world around us will make the European leadership understand that important decisions are needed and that Europe needs to put its act together.
I hope so. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, for being here, and I hope to follow your work in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Now that you have heard the conversation, let me step back and explain why this matters structurally. To understand this debate, we need to separate two things, and these two things are constantly being mixed up: rules and systems. In periods of transition, systems fail before rules. First systems fail, then rules fail. What we see across the digital transition is a classic misattribution problem. When outcomes are bad, actors blame the most visible constraint. Regulation is visible, so if things go wrong, you always blame regulation. Fragmentation is not that visible. Finance structures are not that visible. Data access asymmetries, they're not visible. So from a transition science perspective, this is exactly what happens when indicators lag reality. Europe still measures innovation mainly through research output, project count, startup creation, but competitiveness in AI depends on access to large data sets, scale financing, enforcement speed, and the platform-level feedback loops. The AI Act targets specific high-risk uses. It excludes most low-risk applications, and it applies to any company selling AI systems in Europe, not just to European companies. So when regulation is blamed for Europe's AI gap, we are likely looking at a diagnostic error. And diagnostic errors lead to bad strategic errors. This is why this interview matters. It helps us see where Europe is actually constrained and where it's not. So let me suggest you two concrete actions you can take in the next month. First, stop framing regulation as your project risk. In proposals, do not treat compliance as the main obstacle. Treat fragmentation, data access, scalability as the real risks you are solving. Evaluators increasingly will understand this. with time. Second, align your project narrative with system-level bottlenecks. Explicitly show how your project reduces fragmentation, improves interoperability, or pulls data in a responsible way, or even creates scale beyond member states or beyond Europe. This is how you align with where Europe is actually vulnerable. If you do this, you are no longer reacting to regulation, you are positioning yourself inside the transition. And believe me, the transition will take place whether you do it or not. So if you want to go deeper into how transitions reshape decision-making, both in research, in innovation, in policy, in investing, you will find more in my book, Transition Science in the Economy, or the newsletter, Policydocs, the Transition Letter. Subscribe, like, share with your friends, because the hardest part of transitions is not technology, is knowing where to look. Hope you enjoy the episode.